So I only just reviewed the latest version of Dell's excellent XPS 13 laptop, updated with a fresh bit of Tiger Lake action. And yes, sorry, I am going to do that in every single Tiger Lake video that I do. But for the last couple of weeks, I've also been testing out this more bendy version of the XPS 13, the 2-in-1 edition, which quickly and easily converts from a laptop into a massive tablet thingy with just a quick bit of wrist action. And the XPS 13 2-in-1 starts from a rather beefy £1,400, just like the original XPS 13 and rivals like the MacBook Pro. So the question is it worth it? Well, I'm glad you asked, because here's my full XPS 13 2-in-1 review after using it as my personal laptop for a fortnight. And for more on the latest greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! Now, like the vanilla XPS 13, this 2-in-1 is a proper skinny machine, albeit slightly heavier at around 1.3 kilos, which to be fair is still proper light for a pro laptop. I had no troubles lugging it around on my immense commute from the bedroom to the kitchen, and Dell's design is sleek and straightforward. There's no real flair here, it is basically all functionality, but I'm still a fan. For one, that metal chassis is surprisingly tough despite the fact that you've got that skinny finish. This is definitely the Bruce Lee of laptops. It's small and skinny, but it is hard as out. Although it's also a big softy inside with a velvety palm rest that feels lovely against the skin. Now, the big whoop of this 2-in-1 versus other Dell XPS laptops is that 360-degree hinge action, which means that you can flip the display and turn this notebook into a tablet, albeit quite a big fat mama tablet. Or alternatively, you can also prop it up in tent mode, which works splendidly well for enjoying a bit of Netflix or YouTube, or playing around with touchscreen compatible apps, especially once you stick the XPS 13 into tablet mode. And naturally, that keyboard is completely disabled once you pass the 180-degree marks. You don't have to worry about mashing the keys accidentally with your fingers or palms. And I definitely appreciate the flexibility of being able to put the XPS 13 2-in-1 into this tablet style mode, great for browsing articles online, things like that. Although it is obviously quite cumbersome compared with dedicated tablets like an iPad Pro. So, you know, if you're going to be using it in tablet mode for more than about sort of 10-15 minutes, you're probably going to want to rest it on a surface. I'm obviously not particularly hench or even partially hench, to be perfectly honest, and I found that about 15 minutes of using it in this tablet mode, my biceps were starting to ache a bit. Unlike the standard Dell XPS 13, the selection of ports is rather limited. You've got a pair of Thunderbolt 4 connections, which are at least split between the two edges, unlike the MacBook's ports, and that's basically it, besides the headphone jack and a microSD memory card slot. So basically, if few things in this life delight you more than a good peripheral or two, then you might have to invest in a hot bit of dock action. And to make sure that unlocking the XPS 13 2-in-1 is as quick and convenient, but also as secure as possible, Dell has thrown in a couple of really good options. For one, you've got a fingerprint sensor built into that power button just housed in the corner of the keyboard, so a quick tap of your print against that, you're generally into the laptop within a second or two. Alternatively, you also have face recognition support courtesy of that 720p webcam, and as you can see, that's generally just as quick, if not quicker, than the fingerprint sensor, and it works really well even in a dark environment. And I also found that 720p webcam was absolutely fine for a good bit of Teams, Skype, Zoom, whatever video conference and joy your 2020 has been full of. I found that even in quite softly lit environments like this one, I tend to come through in quite a bit of detail on that cam, so you'll definitely want to stick on a bit of makeup if you look as bleary-eyed as I do, and don't forget to shave as well. And sadly, there's no privacy shield to cover up that webcam when you don't want it to be in use, but you do at least get a little LED that flashes on alongside it to let you know when the camera is being used by an application, although it is very, very small and probably quite easy to miss. And I also found that the XPS 13's dual mic setup worked perfectly fine for a bit of Skyping, Zooming, whatever. If you don't want to be rocking a headset, they made me sound perfectly natural and human. In fact, they actually made me sound a bit more suave than I do in real life. I think they just lowered my voice just like half an octave or something, made me sound really sexy, which of course was quite appropriate for Skyping with my mum. And when you've got the XPS 13 2-in-1 in laptop mode, like so, you'll notice that that backlit keyboard really makes the most of the limited space it has. It's kind of insane just how close to those edges the keyboard stretches, almost literally a gnat's chuff away from the very sides. That means you get good sized keys that are easy to touch type on despite the laptop's compact design. The travel is unsurprisingly shallow, so I did find that the typing action was quite hard on my fingertips at first, although you do kind of adjust over time. And while the return key stretches across 2 rows, Dell has unfortunately committed the cardinal sin of cramming the page down and up keys next to those tiny cursor keys. So yeah, inevitably you could guarantee every time I tried to use those cursor keys to move just a single row up or down in a document, I'd end up hitting the page down or page up and skipping all the way to the bloody end. Yippee hooray. So eventually I just ended up ignoring those cursor keys and just using the perfectly responsive and spacious touchpad to move around in my documents instead. Otherwise, of course, you've got the touchscreen controls, which again, perfectly responsive and perfectly accurate. And thankfully those hinges stay nice and stiff when you're in touchscreen mode as well, so it is a pleasure to use. Speaking of that display, it's a compact 13.4-inch LED panel, and it's perfect for play as well as work. The Full HD resolution serves up fine detail when you're editing photos or just chilling with some Netflix, although you can upgrade to 4K if you're loaded. Contrast is sharp and the colour temperature is pleasingly neutral, while those visuals have a realistic edge too. The full sRGB gamut is accurately covered, as is 78% of the Adobe RGB. That 16:10 aspect ratio is just as well suited to multitasking with two apps side by side as it is for streaming a movie, and the anti-reflective finish is perfect for venturing outdoors. That display doesn't dim down quite as much as I would have liked for evening use, but on top brightness it is positively retina searing. It hits around 450 nits, which is definitely better than most rivals. You got a pair of stereo speakers hidden away on the laptop's arse, so sadly you don't have that audio blasting at your face whichever mode the XPS 13 is in, but the speakers are still loud enough to make themselves heard when you're in a fairly noisy environment. And if you do want to listen to some tunes on the XPS 13 2-in-1 as well, of course you've got that headphone jack built in, and you've got reliable Bluetooth 5.1 support. The everyday experience with the XPS 13 2-in-1 was generally positive. My internet connection stayed strong thanks to the Wi-Fi 6 support, great news if you've already upgraded your router. The only issue I really had with the XPS 13 2-in-1 was a weird bug where occasionally the display would just go completely black for no reason whatsoever, not even with me like twisting the hinges or anything like that. Wait a few seconds and generally it would flicker back to life, but I was never really sure what was causing it and I never really got to the bottom of it. And I did see one total crash as well, where again the screen went completely blank and then the whole laptop basically refused to do anything until I held down the power button for bloody ages, so that wasn't great. Those little issues aside, the general performance is good thanks to the fresh Intel Core i5 1135G7 processor plus 8 gigs of RAM. I could happily mess around with a couple dozen Chrome tabs open at once without seeing any slowdown here, and likewise I could edit pics in GIMP and indulge in other creative tasks. Of course, the XPS 13 uses basic integrated Iris Xe graphics, so don't expect to blaze through many games. It's older and less demanding titles only, sadly. And benchmarking results were unsurprisingly limited. The likes of Cinebench returned a score of just 920 for instance. But thankfully the XPS 13 2-in-1 didn't seem to heat up much at all, even when I was using it for an extended period of time. This base model comes packing a 256GB NVMe SSD, and it's certainly not sluggish, but it's hardly whip it fast either, topping 2 gigabits per second for read speeds and falling just under that for write. And sadly, with those kinds of speeds, the Dell XPS 13 2-in-1 is beaten by quite a lot of rivals around this sort of price point. You can also boost the level of storage that you get in there by throwing more cache at Dell. Otherwise, you can of course expand that storage using the microSD memory card slot I mentioned earlier. As for the battery life, I found I tended to get around 5 to 6 hours of mixed use per charge. That's generally like working in Chrome with a few tabs open and streaming media at the same time. But obviously, if you aren't working in Chrome, you tend to get slightly better battery life because it is a major juice hog. And that's a very similar result to the standard XPS 13 and many other ultra-portable laptops around this sort of price point. Oh, and I am still geekily fond of Dell's cute little LED bar, which tells you when the battery is fully charged, always handy. So that right there is my full review of the Dell XPS 13 2-in-1 flexible tablet cum laptop type thingy. And yes, like the standard XPS 13, it's certainly not cheap, but if you want a capable ultra-portable it can use for basic creative tasks and the like, then it definitely does the job more than well. Gorgeous display, pretty decent usability and all that, although the standard XPS 13 definitely has a more impressive keyboard. So it'd be great to hear your own personal thoughts on the XPS 13 2-in-1, especially if you've been using one at home yourself. Please do poke, subscribe and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest greatest tech, and have yourselves a lovely rest of the week. Cheers everyone, love you!